Biden administration, the Democrats are weaponizing the FBI, and it has to stop.
Same with the January 6th. Because Trump didn't do anything wrong with January 6th because he ordered the National Guard. Nancy Pelosi denied it.
In my opinion, this is communism.
Those are just a few of the angry protesters outside of Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Now, their reaction is an example of what happens when misinformation and disinformation spreads. It all sounds a little too much like the kind of angry rhetoric we frankly heard before January 6th. Now, NBC News has learned the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security have issued an unclassified joint intelligence bulletin warning of a spike in threats to federal law enforcement. This is unprecedented, so let me bring in my panel. Alyncia Johnson is a political strategist and chief impact officer of 1063 West Broad, and Doug Heye is a Republican strategist and former communications director for the Republican National Committee. Y'all, Doug, I'm gonna start with you.
Good way to start it.
Okay, I mean, like, there are now reports of armed Trump supporters protesting outside the FBI office in Phoenix. In addition, I've got violent threats being made against the judge and agents connected to the case at Mar-a-Lago. It seems like people in our country have learned zero lessons since January 6th.
Yeah, look, my biggest concern with all things Trump was that somebody was going to get hurt. And in the quaint pre-January 6 days, that was that somebody might target a journalist. Maybe there'd be some kind of violence at an event. Not what we're seeing right now, where people are very fearful for their lives. We've already seen what's happened with rising violence in this country, from Gabby Giffords to Steve Scalise and the shootings that they've endured to obviously what culminated in January 6th. But the problem is that's not a culmination. There's very real concerns that there will be more. And the problem is, for my Republican brethren who, want to look for reasons to support Trump on everything, operating out of fear, is there's going to be a very real event that happens if Republicans take over, where they have the conference meetings, and Kevin McCarthy or somebody's going to have to say, look to your right, look to your left. One of y'all might not be back. And the Democrats are going to have to do the same. That's how palpable and real this is now.
So despite the rhetoric, we know that the New York Times is reporting that there is a divide in the Republican Party when it comes to how to talk about this. They say that Trump advisors are now telling Republicans to watch out because they do not know what is coming next. Leslie, what might that even mean?
Well, they don't know what's coming next because the reality is a lot of us are just finding out what the search warrant was for. And as we are uncovering what the search warrant was for, we're even seeing Donald Trump kind of walking back on his rhetoric. And so therefore, all of these Fox News conservatives and pundits and people who are blindly going with Donald Trump are having to watch their words because they're actually uncovering some pretty problematic things that we're seeing. And, here's the thing that I'm really concerned about. All of this rhetoric is what we are seeing on the January 6th hearings that have inflamed the insurrection. And now we have all of these historians talking about this rhetoric is very much like the pre-Civil War rhetoric. And so Republicans have to be really concerned with what are they going to be a part of, this era where we saw just like those protesters actually start to be emboldened and do something worse than January 6th? Or are they going to, I know we're going to get to this, sacrifice their comfortable position of power and actually stand up for democracy, which might mean some of them losing some of their power and some of their seats.
Doug, what say you?
Well, let's remember, the Supreme Court is still surrounded by fencing. The Capitol was surrounded by fencing for months and months. This is very real. And I spoke to or texted with one of the members of Congress who visited Donald Trump the next day. And I said, be really careful here, because here's the problem with all things Trump politically, is you start by defending him. This is unfair, whatever this is. And the next day or 2 days later, you find out, oh, it was worse than we thought. So that's already happened so predictably here, and it may well happen again. And you've put yourself politically so far out there that all of a sudden you've no other place to go. You've walked too far. And, Trump benefits every step of that way.
That's right.
Let's talk about the midterms here. And we know that this week, President Biden is set to sign the Inflation Reduction Act. It's a big deal. Everybody's wondering how it's going to play into the midterms. There are midterm elections, specifically primaries, happening on Tuesday in Wyoming. Jonathan Allen is with us. I want to bring him in now. Jonathan Allen, he is a senior national politics reporter for NBC News. He's on the ground in Jackson, Wyoming, and he's talking to voters there. Jonathan, I want to chat with you about Congresswoman Liz Cheney and the fight for her political life. We have a new University of Wyoming poll that has her trailing her opponent by nearly 30 points ahead of Tuesday's primary. And despite this, she is embracing her role as the top Republican on the January 6th committee. Here's a bit of her new ad.
The lie that the 2020 presidential election was stolen is insidious. It preys on those who love their country. It is a door Donald Trump opened to manipulate Americans to abandon their principles, to sacrifice their freedom, to justify violence, to ignore the rulings of our courts and the rule of law.
The background of that ad is given Wyoming. John, what are you hearing from Wyoming voters on this?
Well, there's certainly a division among Wyoming voters, but the vast majority of them appear to be on the side of Donald Trump and Liz Cheney's challenger, Harriet Hageman, who has basically embraced Trump. Simone, I think the axis of politics has really changed. It used to be Republicans versus Democrats about whether government was smaller or bigger. Now it's a coalition of Democrats and a handful of former Republicans who believe there should be a government, and a Republican Party that is arguing essentially against for dismantling what we have as a republic. And we're seeing that play out on the ground here in Wyoming, where Donald Trump got his biggest margin in 2020.
You know, it does look like that most of the House Republicans who voted to impeach former President Trump, that they're now losing their primaries, or they have decided to leave Congress altogether. What do you think Cheney's expected loss, for example, could mean for the future of the Republican Party, John?
I think there's an important moment here in terms of what Liz Cheney does with this energy, with the fundraising that she's done. She's raised somewhere around $15 million for this race as of the last counting. There are obviously Republicans and some Democrats who support what she's saying. That's not something that's going to be viable in Wyoming in the near future. However, we might see Liz Cheney choose to use that as a springboard to run a super PAC in the future, to run some sort of other organization, or what some voters here are saying they hope is that Liz Cheney runs for president, either as a Republican or as an independent.
All right, John Allen for us in Jackson, Wyoming. Alencia, Doug, you just heard John. That's what the voters are saying. That's what some of her supporters are saying. What do we think the odds are that Liz Cheney actually does run for president in 2024?
Okay, so I don't know specifically what she'll do, but I'll tell you, when you talk to her staff, I've never talked to a congressional, political campaign, Senate campaign, or even presidential that is so at peace with itself and the decisions they've made. So regardless of what happens Tuesday, and Liz Cheney wants to win, no doubt about that.
She does. She has actively said that, too. She's not trying to lose.
And she's working, but they are so at peace with the decisions they've made. They're going to move forward one way or another, whatever that may be. And Jonathan pointed out, I thought really well, could be a super PAC, could be an independent race, could be a Republican presidential race. That's a very small window, perhaps. But she's going to do something. We're not going to stop hearing about her come Tuesday night.
All right, Alencia?
Well, listen, Liz Cheney is a conservative, and I think people are forgetting that she voted for the President Trump's agenda nearly, 80% of the time?
Even more than 80%.
More than 80% of the time.
95. She's a real Republican now.
Exactly. And so people are kind of forgetting about that when she stood up for democracy by voting to impeach him, as well as leading the January 6th committee. And listen, I have to agree with my co-panelists here with Doug, and that they are very calm and focused on Tuesday, and also knowing that she has said, I will stand up for democracy. This line is drawn, and I will also stand and help hopefully rebuild this Republican Party to hopefully stand for something. And so, I'm looking forward to seeing what Liz Cheney will do next. If she doesn't make it out of Tuesday, which the polls say that she may not, her future isn't over.
And the first next will be new hearings for September on January 6th.
The clock is ticking. All right, Doug Heye, Alencia Johnson, thank you both very much.